Hey, this is Eddie Olczyk. You're listening to Empty Betters with Nick, Mac, and Harrison.
We are now pleased to have Jesse Marshall, Penguins analyst on The Athletic, join the Empty Betters podcast. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, anytime, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So I'm obviously a big fan of your work, being the Pens fan on the podcast. I think you do a great job breaking down analytics, video, all that stuff on Twitter. If you're a Pens fan listening, definitely go give Jesse a follow. But Jesse, before we get into the Pens talk, just for anybody who is out there that, maybe wants to get into sports coverage or writing, just, maybe give a little background about how you got into it and your path.
Yeah, I guess I guess I always like to start stuff like this out anytime I'm asked this question by like encouraging people that are potentially taking like non-traditional routes to do sports writing. I went to Point Park University, which is a liberal arts college in Pittsburgh, and produced like a lot of people in the Pittsburgh media scene went to Point Park, but they were all journalism majors, right? I was an English major. I didn't know anything about journalism at all. Still don't. Pretty much entirely self-taught, right? Like, there's a big difference between writing research papers in the English world and writing an inverted pyramid and stuff like that in journalism. But James Myrtle, I always say, is like really the first guy who kind of broke the barrier of going from blog to publication, and that opened the door, I think, really for anyone to be able to do it, and especially when the Athletic launched. I mean, there's a sense of like irony in like Myrtle hiring me to work for Pittsburgh because we both kind of like took, I think, like the same non quote unquote traditional route to go from blog to more traditional outlet. So I guess my encouragement to people when asked this question is, I remember being in college, probably like my senior year, realizing it was too late to switch majors, but having like a semi decent blog that was like picking up views. And I remember reaching out to somebody on the Penguins beat at the time and saying like, hey, do you have advice for someone? Here's my situation. I'm interested in breaking into the business. And they were like, yeah, quit what you're doing and go write police fire reports in the newspaper because otherwise you'll never write about hockey. And like I printed that out and like it's still hanging up in my office. Like I printed that email out because it's so funny now, it's hilarious to read that.
Yeah.
But I guess that's my advice is, be encouraged by like if you find yourself in a situation where you're saying like I would love to write about hockey one day, or this is my goal, or etc. Start a blog right now. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. You could set it up for free. You could go build a WordPress site for $0 and start writing about hockey right now. That's the kind of the nice thing about the world that we're in today. You don't have to have the rich background. You don't have to have the bells and the dressings. You just have to be able to write and just do it with a high level of frequency. And if you could do that, if you could do a podcast that way, whatever it is, you can make it happen.
That's great advice. And I know we have one journalism major on here, and Mac down there. And, I think he would probably echo, what you just said. And I think it's great advice for anyone who's listening, who wants to kind of, get into sports and maybe cover some of their hometown teams.
Yeah, it's good advice for sure. And honestly, it's funny you mentioned like the police and fire stuff because I think in my very first like journalism 101 class at Marquette, we practiced writing up fake fire stories. And like our professor gave us some fake situation where there was a fire at whatever address and he's spewing off info and it's just type as fast as you can. So it's good exercise no matter what you want to end up writing about for sure.
Yeah, and there's like a fine science to being a journalism major, and I mean, nobody knows that better than you. And there's a whole art behind it, but that can make you better, right? And that can enhance your work, but it's no longer requisite, right? And I think that's kind of I think too many people get hung up on the what ifs. And I equate it to people all the time to looking at a job application and seeing a preference on it that you don't have and then just not applying. We didn't say it was a requirement, right? You just said it was a preference.
Right.
You still have all these other qualifications that you meet. So yeah. Anyway, I went on a diatribe there. Sorry.
No, you're all good. I do want to ask you, how long have you been with the Pens now, or covering the Pens, I should say?
Yeah. So I started like my hobby blog, like quote unquote, like in 2007. And
Okay.
then I sold that and closed that down and joined up with the Pens blog, who had already been going for a really long time at that point and had like a huge brand. And then left there and joined the Athletic. And so really like 14 years, I guess. Wow. It's,
Yeah. Wow.
but I'm like, was arguing about the Penguins on message boards, even I think way before that. So it's a
Yeah.
really long time.
No, I hear you. So let's chat some Pens talk right here. So it's kind of been a weird season in my opinion. It's been a lot of ups and downs with the injuries, the hot streaks, the recent, mediocre streaks, I'll say. What's your general overall feel for the team as we're about to head into playoffs?
Oh man, I think it's one that went from confidence, maybe a month ago, maybe even going back, to Valentine's Day. I think metrically the Penguins were top 7 in the league in most of the, analytical categories you want to look at, and be top 7 in, expected goals, things of that nature. I think the video suggested that they were still a really good team. Sidney Crosby's obviously was still clicking. But I think just since then, things have gone awry. I don't, injury to Tristan Jarry aside for a minute, right? Just the fundamentals of the way this team play the game, the up-tempo forecheck they have, and the sort of the pressure they bring, and that sort of quote unquote, full ice press that's sort of synonymous with Mike Sullivan. That really hasn't been there as much. I think it's left them vulnerable, on the defensive side, and has put some of their defensemen in really rough situations. And I think it's just, what concerns me, and I don't mean to bring the doom and gloom, and the Capitals fans in this are going to be happy to hear all this information. But, but what concerns me is, I think you evaluate a team going into the playoffs, where are their strengths, where are their weaknesses. The weaknesses should never be things that you would expect to see around game 8 or game 9 or game 10, right? Not game 80. And I think we have to talk about that. I don't think, for me, that there's a, goaltending aside, I don't think there's a bigger red flag. Goaltending is always the biggest red flag, right? But to have a team that's fundamentally not able to master their system in the sort of like the crux of their regular season, you really got to start asking some really hard questions about that. And again, injuries aside, I know people have been in and out of the lineup. It's kind of been the same here since 2015. The system hasn't really changed. It is what it is. Right. My question is, what's causing them to have these really fundamental failures that we've seen against the Caps, against the Bruins, against the Rangers especially? It's just kind of been popping up all over the place. And that to me is not only a head scratcher, but it's making me a little bit concerned about how long they're going to last in the postseason.
Oh yeah, I definitely have my concerns. It's been weird here lately with the suspension for Malkin. I think the big thing for me is that, at the start of the year, obviously we had Sid and Gino out, but so you're going to have guys, depth guys, elevate their game, raise their numbers just naturally as a result of that. But here lately, I mean, aside from Danton Heinen, it seems like the depth scoring has completely fallen off the face of the planet. What do you think about that?
I 100% agree. And I mean, realistically, Malkin and all that aside, I mean, they were a team that, average this year has been around 29th in finishing ability. That's, I think, speaks to really the lack of depth they have. I think, the Malkin discourse has been too hot for me to want to go around. It's magma level volcano takes in and out of the city. But if I went up to a Caps fan and I said man, the Caps would be so much better without Cozy in the lineup, you look at me like I had two heads.
Depends on how he's playing. I might agree with you.
Last year we would have shaken your hand and said I'm on your side, but
Welcome to the
this year
club.
he's turned it around, I guess.
But I mean, that's kind of where we're at the Malkin discourse now. Is there's this whole thing of the notion that the Penguins play better when he's out of the lineup, and that's just not true. It's really just not. It's not true. I think you'd be insane to not say that he elevated the play of a lot of the people around him this year, and he himself, was fairly unstoppable at points, playing with really a lot of, let's be frank, scraps. Here's the thing: he's got to come back with some discipline. He's got to come back, I think, a little bit more controlled. And I think he does have the sort of want to freelance a little bit, we'll say, not deviate from the system, but take more risk. I think when times are tight and things aren't going as well, you'd like to see a little less of that. But overall, they need him. They desperately need him. It's been evident he's been out of the lineup. Getting him back is, you hope can help tighten the wheels of this thing a little bit before they get it. But that Boston game was respectable, right? I mean, it was. It had its meltdown moments and it was ugly at times. But I think overall, you felt a little bit better about the way the ship was looking, having seen that game than you did, evaluating some of the performances prior to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward the next couple weeks here into the playoffs, there's a ton of talk about, just what a gauntlet the East is. As Caps fans, we're looking at, are we going to be playing Florida? Is there a chance we could be playing New York? I know that Penguins fans are doing the same thing. Where do you see the most favorable matchup for the Penguins, and who do you not want to see at all?
I don't know that there's an answer to this. Like, I don't know that there's a I want to see answer to this. I'll say this much, right? Like, no disrespect to the Rangers, honestly, but I feel like a lot of the problems that the Penguins experienced at behest of the Rangers this year were really self-inflicted. Like, I don't think the Rangers are playing a style of play or employing a system that is giving the Penguins fits. I think the Penguins have just been dog water against the Rangers this year and have put in some of their absolute worst performances. Because I'm going to go back and, like, you look at the tape, it's not anything the Rangers are particularly doing here that stands out like and screams at you, hey, this is the key. It's more like the Penguins have just kind of given the game up to them and made a lot of really horrific mistakes, unprompted a lot of times. So I guess I probably would still pick the Rangers, and which is a crazy thing to do because they have the best goalie in the league, and that's normally a real Penguin killer. But I can't in good conscience say I want to play Florida. But I think the Penguins' problem is they're not as fast as they used to be, and they kind of are trying to play like they are. And a team like Florida is just going to cut through them, absolutely cut through them, I think, in a playoff scenario. That's just that to me is the systematic nightmare matchup if you're a Penguins fan, is either Carolina or Florida, because they're just too fast. That's just the way it is. I mean, it's just
They're just going to go around you. I mean,
yeah, that's really and I think like what you've seen, and this is what I'm going to be very specific in my concern here, is the stretch pass all of a sudden has reared its ugly head against the Penguins. If they don't get pressure on you and they don't force you to make bad decisions, you've kind of got the time, the space, and the lane to make a really long cross ice pass that immediately puts the pressure on their defense. You've seen Letang, Dumoulin, Marino, all these guys all of a sudden facing the wrong direction on a zone entry because they've just got spun by a long pass they weren't expecting. That stuff shouldn't be happening in the system. I think Carolina and Florida are just much more adept at doing that to you. Not to say the Rangers can't, they can. But I just think systematically, like, that is the piece that really scares me about those two teams in particular.
I want to go back a little bit. A few minutes ago, you were kind of talking about the systems and how the system has pretty much been the same in Pittsburgh, right, for the last several years. Sullivan been the coach since late 2015, if I'm not mistaken. One of the longer tenured coaches. I know John Cooper's the longest, I think, with the Lightning. But I'm curious, and Harry, if you want to chime in on this too, I'm curious how you guys feel about Sullivan these days, and if and when there would be a time to make a change, or if you think that he should just stay until Crosby and Malkin are gone, no matter what, or kind of just want to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I still think he's, one of the better coaches in the league. I do think that over time, as his career has gone on, he's lost some of the elements that made him so successful so early in his career. Like, one of them is willingness to scrap something if it's not working systematically and go to something else. That's not a common trait among NHL coaches. Think back I know we got a bunch of Metro guys in this chat. Bruce Boudreaux, Dan Bilesma. These are names. Todd Reardon's probably another big one. These are names that we hear and we talk about, and the thing that kind of constantly pops up with those names is, well, they didn't do anything different. They just kept running the same thing over and over and over again. It didn't work, right? It broke. Sullivan, I think, early in his career defied that, and there's maybe only a handful of coaches in the league that do it. And I think as time has gone on, he's gotten more stapled to his philosophy and a little, I guess, maybe less creative in how he deploys the team, at a 5-on-5 level. So that being said, there's probably, my argument would be, if you took him out of the equation entirely and he wasn't here at all, especially in a season like this one, where you had so much, you were saying it earlier, so much up and down, people in and out of the lineup, Crosby, Malkin gone, Gensel gone, Russ gone, points. I don't even know if you're in a position now where you're in the playoffs. Maybe you've lost enough ground without Sullivan at the helm that Columbus is in your spot. I don't think that's completely out of the realm of possibility. So the grass isn't always greener, right? I think it's, if they go out of the first round this year and it's ugly and it looks like it did the last couple of years, I don't, it's tough for me to say that a regime with Ron Hextall that has no affiliation to him, right, didn't win a championship with him, doesn't have that connection. I don't think, same with the ownership group for that matter, who's brand new.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to be hesitant to, to want to get to part ways with him if they perceive they can still win in this window. But again, grass isn't always greener. Got to consider what's coming in the other direction. It's not like intra-organization they have someone ready and prepared to take over the position. They'd be going externally probably to hire unless they, were to give it to Todd Reardon. I don't, the Penguins
No,
fans,
please don't.
right?
Don't.
So
I don't know why you guys are saying that's a bad thing. He helped the Penguins out for 2 years in Washington.
That's funny. No, Jesse, I totally agree with what you're saying. And, obviously you win back-to-back cups and you think back to those years and everything seems good. But I just remember when he first came on, he had this presence about him, all, video and analytics aside, just the brand of Mike Sullivan. It was always like, let's just play. We just play our game. He said it over and over and over in 16 and 17. And you really felt it. And you felt like the players felt it. And now, he's still saying it, but it's just, it's hard to really buy into that when, Kapanen's got like 3 goals in 40 games. And you're trying to see him evolve into like that secondary scoring role that's really pivotal in a playoff run, like Sherry did back in the day. I don't know. It just feels a little bit different, a little bit lackluster.
Well, look, you don't have Phil Kessel on your third line anymore. Right?
Yeah, that too.
Huge difference right there.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. He's coaching a team that was, it's been given to him. I do think he's got a sudden reticence to trust and deploy young players, which is weird to me, especially at forward. Yeah, but I mean, to your point, I don't know if you're going to go out and get somebody better than him right now. And I think he's taken the best parts of coaches that had success in Pittsburgh with this core before and melded them all together. He's got the Terrian level toughness with the Bilesma level, let the horses run and go play offense sort of approach. So it's been the right porridge temperature, I think, in that regard. And we have to, I think, at some point acknowledge that really, this core ate through coaches, a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it just did. Mike Sullivan has outlasted all of his predecessors for a reason. So yeah, I think there's a pressure in the city to get out of this first round, even if you don't win a cup. I think that the first round exits are just they're starting to wear on people now. So I again, with a new ownership group and a new GM and assistant GM and hockey ops and all that, I wouldn't be shocked if there was a change made if time or history were to repeat itself.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point about the window too, right? And obviously the Caps are in a similar situation, but with a new coaching system and all that, it takes time to adjust to that, which is almost something you don't want to do if your window's closing, right? It might take longer to bring in a new coaching staff and get everybody going with that than it would to just try and go for another cup with Sullivan. So it'll be interesting.
And I'm less inclined, probably than most people, to believe that the window is closed. I know that's subject to debate, and there are some people that think it's just not open at all anymore. But hey, Sidney Crosby's well over a point per game. Jake Gensel is going to score 40 goals this year, probably, knock on wood. You find a way to keep Brian Rust. You've got one of the more dynamic offensive talents in the league, two-way offensive talents in the league. This is not dire straits here. The Stars are getting older, and there's some tough decisions to be made. But if Ron Hextall navigates it the right way, you're very much still in play here, for a little while longer at least. So that's what makes this offseason and everything that's about to happen, over the course of the next little bit so important.
Yeah, I don't want to ask you this, but I'm going to ask you this. Obviously, we got playoffs coming up, and that's what you want to focus on. And you don't have to dive into this too deep, but do you think it's possible they can keep Letang, Malkin, and Rust, all three of them?
No, absolutely not. No chance.
Okay.
And I think that, again, you have an ownership group who I think respects the history. And I say ownership group, it's not like Mario Lemieux's not still around, right? Like, he's still here, still carrying his weight. But you have a new group here, and I are they going to want to pay Chris Letang $10 million a year? Or are they going to want to hash out a deal with Brian Rust and keep him here for a while longer? If we were to judge that based off of other sports and how they behave in other sports, they're going to keep Rust. Like, that's just what they've done in other scenarios, right? And I that's probably a play I'd probably agree with. So I just don't see a way, knowing. Take a look at some of these contracts that are getting handed out, right? Like, look at Rasmus Ristolainen.
How?
Well,
How?
Flyers, yeah, but yeah.
Sure, but just look at what do you think Brian Rust could get on the open market?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it'd be
exactly.
stupid. It'd be dumb. The Oilers would go out and find a way to pay him and just play with 6 forwards and no goalie. And that'd be their strat next year. That'd be the new OP strat in the AHL. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it's possible. I think this is going to be the off season of reckoning, gentlemen, for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Things are going to happen, like it or not.
One player I wanted to ask you about was Kasperi Kapanen. What have your thoughts been on him so far this season?
Well, I feel like a lot of what I said about him when that trade went down has come to roost. His issues being from a hockey brain perspective, a smarts perspective, he didn't really have what it took to cut it in the top 6 in Toronto. The issues with, why that was the case are rearing their head again in Pittsburgh. Let's be honest, you've not even seen this coaching staff attempt to play him with Sidney Crosby.
Yep.
They haven't even entertained it, right? At all. I ran a poll because when he was traded to Pittsburgh, I was like, wow, he's going to put him in the top line where Crosby's going to be great. And I had a poll on Twitter, like, how long would this actually last if it happened in training camp? And I don't even, most people voted Halloween as the end date. We didn't even get to that. They torched that blueprint before we even got to that point. So it's a lot of get into the zone, cross the offensive blue line, whoa up, stop, right? Kill your momentum, wait for everybody else to get up, turn it over. That's it. Or shoot it a high wide off the glass. And now it's a breakout for the other team.
That took 6 or 7 seconds.
Yeah. So it's been brutal. I don't think there's any other way to cut it. I think that there are some situations where people aren't scoring goals, and you look at the data, and the data says, wow, they're drowning in scoring chances, right? It's a matter of time before this changes and the floodgates open. But that's not the case here, right? This is a player who's not scoring a lot of goals, and also isn't getting a lot of scoring chances. So it's like you just don't expect this to change anytime soon. And I think we have to, like, at least for the rest of this run, adjust our perception on what he is as a player and accept that, like, he could be a useful bottom six guy. Like, he really could. Like, he has the potential to do that. And if you find the right mix down there, it could work. And I think that's the focus now. That should be the focus. Find that mix, adjust your expectation, lower it, and you know, I think you may find that he can meet it in the bottom six. Again, we're all going to kind of have to collectively adjust and adapt here.
So do you have any, like, I hate to use this term, but like insider knowledge if Jari's going to be okay and play game one? Because I'm sweating over here, Jesse. It's not looking pretty.
I know he's not going to play. No chance. I
God.
will tell you this though. I and I'm no like friggin' doctor, but pain management is a thing in sports, right? Like we all know that. Take a shot, slap on the ass and get out there and play, right? Like we'll see you later. That, he's, I think, probably looking at a scenario where that's a possibility later on, like not tomorrow, not the next day, not game one. But like there's, as a goalie, right? like he's using his foot to do everything, right?
Yep.
To push off, to get up, to get down, to go side to side, to get off the post. That becomes compromised. So you can manage it. There's pain management. I just, I don't know anything beyond that. And I'm even speculating now. So it does not the type of situation that strikes me as, is going to be resolved in the very near future.
So don't want to keep it.
I have to complain about this for a second.
Oh, go ahead.
I know a lot of people are like, well, you didn't get a goalie at the deadline. They have $11,000 in cap space.
Yeah.
I mean, $11,000 in cap space.
Yeah.
And it's disingenuous to make that claim. I think if you want to make the argument, punt it further back and have it in the offseason last year. Like, why didn't this get addressed before the season started? I'll entertain that discussion. We can have that discussion. I won't have that discussion about the deadline. They gave DeSmith a run of games for him to get the opportunity to get his footing and prove himself, and he did it. I've jokingly said all year, if you look at the top 10 saves of the year for the Penguins, 7 out of the 10 are Casey DeSmith in like the last month.
Yeah, I saw that tweet, and you're exactly right.
He secured the job, rightfully so. If you want to get into depth, you want to have these other discussions, I'll have them. But we got to go further back than this. We got to go way, way back in the offseason. And by the way, like the Penguins very much believed, and I think we're right in believing, that Andy Chiodo was going to make a significant difference with the group. I think he did. I think Tristan Jarry was on the precipice of having his career ruined by that playoff performance. Just like, make no mistake about that. He single-handedly lost the series for the Penguins. Knew about it, like was well aware it had happened, and comes back and for most of the years in the top 10 of like every major goaltending metric you want to look at. So, we can have the debate on all day long on like whether or not addressing this was the right call. The point is, it is what it is now. You have to live with it, and you better hope that Louis Dominguez is ready to give you another Jeff Zatkoff performance in game one if need be or something like that. That's where we're at right now.
Zakhoff, that's a name I forgot about.
Blast from the past, yeah. Well, we don't want to keep you too long. I know, you got a kid at home and you're trying to be quiet and stuff, and big respect for even doing the interview with that going on. I mean, that's dedication. We appreciate that. But the last thing I want to ask you, paint me some type of optimistic picture where I'm not crying myself to sleep by the second week of May, please. Like, what do the Penguins have to do to actually win a round? Regardless of who it's against.
So I think like for the majority of this year, really like overwhelming majority of this year, like you've seen a team, like regardless of opponent, that when they have an engaged forecheck, when they have guys up ice, rotating in and out of their pressure, that they are really a whirlwind and difficult to deal with. And like we even see it now in spurts, right? Like, the captain always leads the way. And I feel like there's been a couple instances over the last 2-3 weeks where he's sort of single-handedly picked the team up by suspenders and drug them across to a win. into 2 points himself. So I'm never going to be completely down. I think on a team that has like a Sidney Crosby playing at a high level, that has proven as a group that they can forecheck. Like we've seen it, right? It's in there somewhere. So the eternal debate with this team is, are they going to flip the switch? Is there a switch? Are they going to magically like turn a generator on in the building that magically kicks things into this extra 11th gear? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that's a thing. I think what you can expect like, in the coming weeks is probably a heavy dose of video from the coaching staff, like embarrassing tape analysis of when things go wrong, with like a real focus on like, here's what we got to get back to. I hope that maybe you see some lineup decisions that align with that. I think Brian Boyle, for instance, has been great, and I think will be very useful in the playoffs, but probably needs a night off here and there. Just things like that, right? So optimism for me is they still have Sidney Crosby, who's still playing at a really high level, and is is playing on one of the best top lines in hockey. So you never completely bet against that.
I would agree with that. I'm holding hope. The generator switch is a perfect analogy because that's what I've been thinking, right? They got 5 games left. Can we just flip the switch, run 5-0 and feel a little bit better about ourselves? Highly unlikely, but we'll see.
I just think that switch either goes away or gets harder to turn on once you eclipse the age of 35.
Yep.
Speaking from experience.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, we really appreciate it, especially with the circumstances you're operating in. We respect the dedication and for coming on the podcast. It's been a great one.
I'm always around to talk hockey, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I would love to do this again in the future, especially if I need some type of therapy after the first round. So
hey, we'll cry it out together.
Yeah, I'll be
There
right
you
there
go.
with you. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
We'll be
All right, we'll see
crying
ya.
too. Don't worry.
Take care. Enjoy
Thank you.
Baltimore too.
Appreciate you.
This is my transmission.